Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts on such subjects as leadership, diversity, women's empowerment, and how you show up to make a mark in the world. My guest today is Lesley Michaels, the author of the wonderful book, On the Shoulders of Mighty Women. And before I get into the whole conversation I had with her, let me talk to you about showing up, because Lesley is now showing up and his book is all about showing up. If you're curious how your presentation skills help you show up at your organization, how you show up in the world, you can take our free 4-minute quiz at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you are showing up as strong, authentic, powerful, and as a leader, and where perhaps a little bit of support could help you get the results you need and the recognition you deserve. I'm honored today to have Lesley Michaels back on the program. We've had her here a couple of times. And her official bio is Lesley Michaels is a keynote speaker and transformational coach who applies simple brain science to reset habitual behavior patterns and establish the mindset of unwavering self-trust. She also leads women to build strategic alliance networks to elevate their effectiveness and strengthen their voices as leaders in today's business arena. More than ever before, life in the time of COVID-19 has taught us that we need consistent and never-ending innovation. We need agility to pivot with ease, and we need evergreen resilience to create sustainable success. Lesley helps the individual, organization, and leadership to not just navigate, but employ change as a strategy for creating new opportunities to achieve maximum performance in business and life. Coaching and advocating for those who with unacknowledged or undervalued voices is central to Lesley's life and work. She's often referred to as the coach's coach. Lesley is admired for her inspiring impact on creative thinkers, social innovators, and transformational coaches, and heart-centered leaders worldwide. The book is called On the Shoulders of Mighty Women. And here's this wonderful interview with the very interesting Lesley Michaels. Lesley Michaels, thank you so much for coming back to Speakers Who Get Results. Welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It is my delight always to come and have a conversation with you.
Well, it's really fun to have you with us as well, because you gave us such an interesting interview earlier this year. We're recording this in 2022, and such an interesting interview about creating strategic alliances among women. And now you have written the book. It's been out for a bit, but we are broadcasting this pre-Christmas so that everybody, you're going to be able to go out and get this awesome book. But before I get into the book called On the Shoulders of Mighty Women, I'd like to ask you, who would be your dream interview? If you were to interview somebody, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
I would interview Stacey Abrams. And I know you have an international audience. She is a dynamic woman who ran for governor in Georgia once and was defeated, and she's running now, and we are pushing with everything we have to support her to get there. I would ask her what those of us who are fully engaged but might not be thinking of could do to help push the envelope to bring about more democracy and to bring about more equity for women. And I would also want to ask her what it feels like to be such an icon, and how does she plan to use that most effectively?
Stacey Abrams, I should say for international listeners, if you've never seen a picture of her, she's Black. She ran for governor. She got very close.
Yes.
And it is possible that only because of dirty tricks on the behalf of the white men who were running the elections, she only lost because of dirty tricks. That's quite possible. And then she was instrumental in getting Raphael Warnock as the senator, a Black senator, and which changed the balance of power in the Senate. Everybody knows at this point we're in 2022 and we've had several years of great polarization. So she is awesome. I agree. Stacey Abrams, I think 50 years from now, we're going to say, I want to interview Stacey Abrams.
Yes.
She's really, really quite something. What is it? So how would it be to be an icon? How does this relate to your wonderful book, On the Shoulders of Mighty Women?
Being an icon?
And being a mighty woman, really.
Being a mighty woman, well, it is my unwavering belief, Elizabeth, that every one of us has a mighty woman inside of us. And that too many of us are not giving her voice. We are afraid to challenge the status quo, to shift the paradigm. And if ever there was a moment, this is it, for women to begin to speak up, to be loud, and to be bold, and to be audacious. And that is what a mighty woman is. And we do all have it inside of us.
Before I forget, could you please hold up the cover of the book? It's a very beautiful cover. Yes, so that we can see On the Shoulders of Mighty Women. We will put the information in the show notes so you can order it. It's a really good book. It's very well written.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed reading it. We've been talking a lot about women and the mighty women in the book. Why does each one belong in the chapter or the theme where you mentioned her?
Well, I have, of course, you've read the book now, so I have different groups of mighty women in the book. I have first the ones who were my great influences and put me on the path to looking for something more and being willing to speak to something more, from my audacious suffragette grandmother through my first 4 mentors, all women who were my senior, powerful, accomplished, and who volunteered to be my first mentors. And then we have a different group, a second group of mighty women, 5 of them who contributed greatly to 5 different chapters, each in their area of expertise. I will use Dr. Shelley Grunig as an example. Shelley, my dear friend, had just finished her PhD. She was looking for some way to equip her kids so that they would have viability in the marketplace in an area that drove their passion. Well, she ran across a robotics program, and she started teaching it for her kids. 15 years later, she has been inducted into the Robotics Hall of Fame. She is the 4th top, has been named the 4th top robotics coach on the planet. She has this amazing team. And what is most interesting to me about this is that Shelley is from New Mexico. They're one of the 4 poorest states in the country. If you're in Pennsylvania, Ohio, California, New York, those schools, the kids in those schools can letter in robotics the same way they would in basketball.
Oh.
There's not a single robotics course anywhere in New Mexico. She built this entire program, this massive team that's winning international awards on $10 for grandmas and bake sales and everywhere that she could get support. And I have amazing respect for her.
Well, New Mexico does have the Los Alamos labs. So it does have the town of Los Alamos, which is full of scientists. But I imagine that that's a bubble. And
it's a bubble, and it's a different approach to science because Los Alamos is all about nuclear energy versus robotics.
Okay. So science is a large category.
It is.
So having, well, good for her. I'm definitely want to, that's a great example. You say that you are a modern day feminist.
Yes.
What is feminism and what isn't?
I love this question. Thank you for asking me. Let's start with what it isn't. It is not a movement to overthrow men. It is not a movement that hates men, that wants to oppress men, that wants to flip the power balance so that only women are on top. All of these are urban myths that have been perpetuated so strongly that too many people believe them. A feminist is someone who believes in the equal and equitable treatment of all people, regardless of gender, culture, race, religious experience, what have you. And feminism is just the perpetuation of that belief, becoming involved politically, socially, grassroots organizations to bring awareness and change into our society, into our political arena, and into our business arena.
I love that. Tell me, you talk about the primary message of the book being the importance of strategic alliances.
Yes.
Why is it necessary to write a book? I mean, there are plenty of books out there about women's empowerment, et cetera, et cetera. Why is this one different and important? It is. So listeners and watchers, this is a book that's different and important and worth reading. I can guarantee that having read it. But Lesley, what's your explanation for why it matters?
I can only offer the perspective from which I wrote the book, which was that I did not want to address just one area of women's lives or another. There are so many books, and I do not disparage them. They fill my bookshelves. There are so many books that speak to just one area of women's lives or another. And women have, whether it is in society, whether it is in school, whether it is in our literature or in our nonfiction, have been compartmentalized to the point that they have forgotten to a great degree who they are, and they have ceased to acknowledge everything they accomplish. And in doing so, they have not been able to recognize the power that they are and the brilliance that they are. So I went into this book to approach women from a number of perspectives in terms of their lives. It's impossible to put all of a woman's life in one book. But I wanted to bring in different perspectives and different activities, different engagements that the average woman is involved in on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and then to very clearly illustrate through data, through story, how women in each one of these areas are placed in a position of being second class or third class citizens, and how we can make changes so that we no longer remain in those positions.
I love that. This is a very large part of the work that I do, is helping women recognize the things that we do, because we are trained from as children. We are socialized.
Yes.
Not necessarily actively trained, but socialized as to be nice and to defer. And one can see, if you want to talk about history and so forth, one can see why it's useful for a certain part of society to keep their power by not giving power, allowing power to women, and certainly women of color. And
Yes.
that's something that is changing slowly. As we're talking about it, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is one of the techniques. One of the things I love about the book is that you don't just complain. You talk about, okay, what can we do about it? You have your 3 tables with the to-do list for the long-term, the short-term, long-term, and the to-do list for yourself, which I hadn't seen that before. I loved that. Talk a little bit about that one.
Thank you. That was something I created for myself, because I was brutal on myself. Everything I speak about in this book, I know firsthand. All of the falling downs and all of the bad habits, the women can rest assured that I've been there. And I was trying to determine a way to, I would start something and then I would stop. We've all been there. I was trying to determine a way to keep myself accountable. And so I created a list. These are the things I'd like to do. And then it naturally broke down into, oh, well, I can do these things weekly. I can only do a couple of these things a year. I can only do this once every few years. And therein began the charts. And for years, I have invited women to create these charts to do for you. These are the things you're going to do every week. These are the more significant things that you are going to be sure and incorporate in your life at least twice a year, whether it's a weekend trip, a vacation, whatever it is. And then this is that great dream that you have left on the shelf to the point that it has 2 inches of dust on it. Now let's pull it out, knock off the dust, put it on your chart, and put a timeline on it. Now, your timeline may be next year. It may be 6 years from now. It doesn't matter what it is. But put it on there and then read that every day. And you will find yourself spontaneously here and there doing little things to prepare for that trip, because it's getting closer.
Okay. All right. I love that. I love that idea. Another thing that you talked about is the importance of mentors. And that's something that I talk about a lot, especially different kinds of mentors. And you have a wonderful quote by Mary Stutz. In case you don't have it in front of you, I put it in the chat because I really want you to read this to us.
I have it right here as it would happen.
Good. Just in case. Yes.
Mary Stutz is author of The Missing Mentor. And the entire book is about women's resistance to mentoring and coaching. And Ms. Stutz says, women are way behind in developing and utilizing mentors. Women need to create a development plan to gain experience and be deliberate about each step along the way. Even in executive positions, very few women have any sort of development plan, and this is scary. I've found that many women are developing comfort. I personally have found that many women are developing comfort by finding a group of peers who meet monthly in intentional alliance groups, and it is helping them to get past this fear of support and this false idea that women have, that they must do everything on their own or it isn't valid.
Well, I've been thinking about that, and I believe that some of that, for me at least, comes from being taught to be careful. You've heard the phrase, boys are taught to be courageous and girls are taught to be careful.
Yes.
And there's also in there an implied message that if a girl makes a mistake, it's forever. And you must not, you have to be perfect. As a recovering perfectionist myself, I did a lot of damage to myself in my younger years, trying to be perfect and trying to live up to impossible standards, most of which were in my head. If I had ever asked those impossible standards, people said, no, we don't hold you to those standards. But I thought, and that's one of the ways that girls are socialized. And Mary Stutz is certainly, besides being a wonderful human being, she's a great example of how to rise, how to get mentors. One of the things that I find is that women tend to network sideways with peers because it's comfortable.
Yes.
Instead of finding mentors who are a few steps ahead of you down the road, or maybe quite a bit ahead of you down the road, but who have the power to help you. Talk a little bit about why it doesn't feel safe to ask. And that's going to lead us into the comfort zone versus the stretch zone, which is another great phrase of yours.
Early on, when I was in corporate oil, I had a wonderful mentor in corporate oil.
So you were in the oil and gas industry, right?
Back when I was the
only woman
in the room.
Yes.
But I did have a wonderful mentor. And he always mentored me by asking me questions that he knew I probably couldn't answer. But then he'd give me the answer. One of the most important questions he ever asked me is, who would be your ideal mentor? I named a few people, and he said, you are making the mistake that every woman I encounter makes.
Mm-hmm.
And you are better than that. He said, reach up.
Yes.
Women are afraid to reach up because they are afraid to expose what they don't know. But only in exposing what you don't know can you put yourself in a position to be effectively mentored. That has stayed with me to this day. The fact that we are afraid to reach up, and that the reason is we are afraid to expose what we don't know.
Because we're supposed to be perfect. Because if you make a mistake, it reflects on every woman.
Yes.
Which is not so much the case anymore, but it was in my childhood. It was the implicit message.
Yes.
Which kept me small.
If men make a mistake, it's a mistake. If women make a mistake, it's a character flaw.
Yeah.
And they are the first to judge it as such, and they are their worst critics and their harshest abusers. And this is a tradition that we must stop.
And one of the things about admitting a mistake is you survive. You don't die. It's not the end of the world. You say, oh dear, that was a mistake. And if you learn if you can practice saying, oh, I got that wrong. Let me make it better. Let me make it better. That was a really hard one for me to learn. Really hard one to accept. As you talk about, so we're talking about this, you have a section in the book called the comfort zone versus the stretch zone.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
The comfort zone could be accurately renamed the habit zone. That is where we have grown so comfortable that we have roots into the center of the earth, and that is keeping us from moving and expanding. What I encourage women to do is to find an area, any area, that repeats itself in their life. whether it is that they have to do this type of presentation on a regular biweekly basis, or whatever the situation is that they find incredibly uncomfortable, and to begin speaking confidence to themselves around doing this very specifically. And when they do not hit the mark that they had set for themselves, I have a sentence that I invite them to start playing with. Well, no one died today. To actually put it in the context that no one died today. So there is another day. No one died today.
That's a very interesting, that's going to be a tweetable tweet, I think, here. How can we move forward, move up? You do a lot of work helping women form strategic alliance groups.
Yes.
Please talk to us about this, and how can we learn more?
I write about how to form a strategic alliance group in the book. Also, I work directly with women to help them to create a very stable alliance group. And then I step out. They can take it from there. So I work with people in individual instruction, in group instruction, through the book. And the reason for strategic alliance is multiple. First of all, you form a bond and you have a relationship with these women. And so you become comfortable putting out your challenges and the areas where you feel like you are completely blundering. I always encourage in a strategic alliance group that they rotate. And each month, someone else leads with their own new content. So you get to practice on a friendly audience and you get to get generous feedback. Also, through the strategic alliance groups I've been involved with and am still involved with, that has been a rich source of important connections.
And your cohort, your peers, your group, your support group there can also push you when you're playing small. The idea is it's so much easier to do that for somebody else. Yeah, or someone else who can see when you're playing small and say, hey, you could you could do farther, you could do more.
That's absolutely correct. And when you set up very clear house rules, I call them, where a person is comfortable receiving that because they are asked, may I make an observation? Not may I tell you something? Can I point something out? May I offer an observation?
Good phrase.
It's a very neutral space. And then the person receiving gets to take that in and determine how, if anything, and when they want to make a change in that area. And that's just one of the house rules.
One of the things I love about this, this is with the things that I do with the visible and valued masterminds, is you have a group which is your safe space, your base. And women do that in some ways because of being taught to be small, of being taught to not push, don't be aggressive, don't be obnoxious. If you speak up for yourself, no one's going to die. Even if you get pushback, and you will get pushback, it's not the end of the world. Kind of akin to growing up with siblings or not. If you grow up as an only child, you don't learn how to fight early on. Whereas with siblings, you learn how to fight and then survive. I certainly remember times in my life looking at older women and saying, those sisters like each other. How could that be? I'm never going to like my sisters. And now sisters are your best support. So when you do your strategic alliance groups, how could somebody start a strategic alliance group?
First of all, determine the area in life that you want to focus on. It's deeply important that you focus a group on a area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you will cover many topics within that area, but whether it's professional advancement, social justice, etc., pick your group area. Consider everyone you know who might be interested in this, who might be a good partner in coming into a group like this with you. Have a conversation and remember that they know people you don't know. So you create a group. I recommend 12 as a number for a group because you meet once a month. Not everyone's going to make it to every meeting. And 12 gives you enough that when you have a meeting, there are going to be enough people show up to make it worth your time, because time is a great expense in our lives, let's say.
And taking time for yourself.
Yes.
And your long-term development is always hard when there are always fires to be put out and always demands on your time. Yeah.
And 12 is not too large of a group when everyone shows up.
Great.
So it's a very nice balance point. You start with your topic, you start speaking with individuals who might want to be involved. You create a name for your group. This gives it a level of gravitas. You are not coming here to chat. You're not coming here with your lunch. This is a meeting just like any other meeting. And then you create house rules that everyone verbally agrees upon. And then you start moving forward with your conversations, with your practices, with whatever is applicable to the area you're focused on.
That's wonderful. I love this. Lesley Michaels, that's a great line to end on. Thank you so much for being a guest on Speakers Who Get Results. I will be putting information about how to get your book and how to talk to you in the show notes. And for you, dear listeners, this has been Speakers Who Get Results. And let me remind you that if you're curious about how your presentation skills, how you are showing up and how you are perceived, you can take our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you are showing up as strong and powerful and authentic, and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. Thank you again, Lesley Michaels. I will see you all on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.